Before he was taken up, he was pleasing to God. Do you know if you could take away absolutely everything of motivation in the Christian life and just replace it with one thing, if you could just 24 hours a day or every waking moment live with the greatest motivation to simply be pleasing to God. Not to do great things, not to be an important person in Christendom, not to be well known, not to be well thought of, just one thing. I desire only one thing of the Lord, and that is to be pleasing to Him. Not to satisfy self, not necessarily to satisfy others, but to be pleasing to God. That's your one goal. What would that fix? Absolutely everything. You say, well, would it fix my marriage? Yes, it would. Because your problem in your marriage is always trying to please yourself. And if you set it upon yourself to please God, then you wouldn't have any problems with that selfishness anymore. You say, will it fix my relationships? Most certainly it would. Would it make me a better father? Yes, it would. Would it make me a better mother? Of course. Would it make me a better church? Yes, it would make you a better church. To have one goal. I desire to be pleasing to God. What do you desire? Well, I want to get out of seminary. I want to be in a ministry somewhere. Oh, really? And what if God doesn't want either of those things? Well, I want to get out of college and I want to get a job and go to... Oh, really? We'll have movers and shakers a lot of times. Those are the, I don't know, kind of guys in Christianity that just know how to move things around, know how to get things going, know how to motivate. Sometimes I talk to these guys and they go, well, what's your vision at Heart Cry? What? What's your vision at Heart Cry? Jesus Christ? No. What do you want to do? Because you get scared when they start asking you these kind of questions. Get up in the morning and pray, and then I want to read the Bible, and I want to love my wife when she comes downstairs. I'm going to play with my children and go over Ian's Bible verse. Then I'm going to go to church and I'm going to pray with Darren. No, what's your vision? I said, I don't have a vision except for Jesus Christ. I don't want to be anything. I don't want to be a big shot. I don't want to be important. I don't want to conquer the world. I just want to be pleasing to God today, and that is enough. That is enough. And strive as I might, I haven't attained that goal, so why should I look for another? See, the more I walk with the Lord, the more I realize this childlikeness stuff is really important. Visions. Should we have a vision except Christ? Isn't He the heavenly vision? Should we have plans? I mean, what sort of plans? Daytimers, they don't really work well in planning ministry. Now, I know the necessity of organization. I know the necessity of all that, but what I'm trying to say is simply this. So many times we can have plans and schemes and all sorts of things that we want to do and we want to be, and even in the name of the Lord, and yet they're all just fodder. They're all just sawdust. And God will come and tear them all down and say, I just want this from you. What would it be like if tonight we just simply captured this one thing of, I want to be pleasing to the Lord? When we dismiss, while we're sitting here listening to the message, my thoughts, I want them to be pleasing to the Lord. And when I walk around and meet with brothers and sisters in Christ, well, in that time of short fellowship, I want to be pleasing to the Lord. And when I go home tonight and sit around the table over those marvelous cookies you made, I might say, over those cookies, I want to be pleasing to the Lord. And that's all I want to, and then I want to go to bed. That's it. That's so different than much of what's being promoted as evangelical Christianity today. But he was pleasing to the Lord, and he was pleasing to the Lord before he died. This is such an encouragement to me. It is such a great encouragement. Now, here's something that I want you to look at. Now, a lot of times when we hear about Old Testament saints and things like that, we canonize them. We make them into people that they weren't. We think too much of men. When I look at Enoch, and I think of this man, I think of, what was he as a young follower of Yahweh? I mean, how was he? Didn't he probably stumble like me? Didn't he probably grumble like me? Didn't he have all the faults that I have? Wasn't this life of his of walking with God? I mean, he had hundreds of years to do it. It wasn't a process of growing, but in the end, he was so pleasing to God that God took him. I love what one old preacher said. You've probably heard it 1,000 times, but his explanation of this, I'll never forget. As a little boy, I heard him saying this. He said, well, this is just very simple to explain. Enoch had grown so accustomed to walking with God. They were walking one day and walking, and Enoch just forgot how far he'd gotten away from home, and God looked at him and said, Enoch, we're closer to my house than yours. Just come home with me. I look at this, and I have had the privilege in my life of knowing men like this. Old men and old women, saints of God. And they carry upon themselves this mark. One time a college student said, sir, you're a man of God. I said, no, I'm not. I'm 42. I'm a boy of God. You've got to be at least 65 before you're a man of God. They carry upon themselves this mark of having walked with God. They carry upon themselves this mark of having been loved by God and even chastised by God. They're broken. They're different. They glow. And then they go to be with Him. It gives me great hope. Now I'm in the middle part of my life. I've walked with the Lord just a bit over 20 years. And there is enough in my life to discourage me to think that I'll ever make much progress. But there is Scripture that calls me on to hope that I will make progress. That in the end of my days, Paul Washer will be pleasing to God, because it is a thing that the Lord will see to. That it will be done. And He'll see to it in your life. He who began a good work will finish it. He will finish it. He will finish it. He did that in Enoch's life. He'll do that in ours. Do not become discouraged. Do not become discouraged. By faith, realize that He who began a good work in you will finish it. Now it goes on, verse 6, and without faith it is impossible to please Him. Now why is that? The faith or lack of faith we have with regard to anyone, any person, is a demonstration and a declaration of what we think about their character. If you say to someone, listen, I know what I'm talking about, trust me on this, just do it. And they say, well, I just don't know. You're saying something about their character. You're saying something about their ability. You're not just denying that you want to do something. You are saying something about their character. It is impossible to please God without faith. Because if you do not have faith, you're saying God is not worthy of trust. And that's what we talked about last night, and it's so important. Many people talk about faith and obedience, and they talk about them as two separate entities. In a sense they are, but in a sense they're not. Why do I obey God? Because it's the right thing to do? That's legalism. Why do I obey God? Because I love Him? Yes, Jesus said that. But let's throw in another element here. I obey God because I believe Him. He tells me to walk a certain way. Or He tells you to walk a certain way. You do that not just because obedience for the sake of obedience. You are obeying Him because you believe that what He says is right. When you disobey God, you're looking up at Him and you're saying, as I said last night, one of two things. One, God, you are ignorant. When you do not obey God, you're saying, God, you simply do not understand. You simply don't know how the world is today. You treat God almost like a teenager would teach an old grandfather. Oh, grandfather, you live in the past. You really don't know what's going on today. You really can't understand, and I can't listen to your counsel. That's one possibility. When you disobey God after He has told you to walk a certain way, you're saying, you just really don't know. Or you're saying, God, you know, but you're evil. You know what's right. You know what's best for me, but you don't want to tell me. Because you want to steal my joy, you want to crush my life, you want to take away my freedom. But when God sets out a path before us, as He has in His Word, and we obey it, we're saying, God, I believe that you know everything. And that there is no error in you. And I believe, God, that you are good. There is no darkness in you at all. That what you tell me is the best thing for me, the wisest thing for me, and I will do it because I believe you. When you believe God, or when you do not believe God, you are screaming out what you believe about His character. He's trustworthy, or He's not. He's all-knowing, or He's not. See, that's why disobedience is so vulgar. That is why disobedience is so blasphemous. I said this last night, I want to say it again, because sometimes people who run somewhat in our circles are always talking about the law, the law, the law, as though it was something more important than God Himself, as though it was something that God had to submit to. My friend, disobedience isn't a horrible, terrible, wicked thing just because the rule has been broken. It is because a holy God has been offended. A God worthy of all obedience has not been obeyed.